Hey, noble ones, welcome to Metatron's Academy. So I just noticed that some people in my audience watch this channel called Jack of All Languages. Now, given I've seen that already there is a video about Italian or Spanish or Argentinian that could be interesting to check out. But first, I'm kind of curious because I see him wearing a football shirt of, is it AC Milan? It is. It's AC Milan. That's how we say it in Italian, by the way. Associazione Calcio Milan. Why do footballers speak so many languages? And I'm really curious. So I'm going to react to that, provide commentary. Maybe next time we'll check out the other one. But without further ado, check him out. Link in the description. Subscribe. All the rest. Great. Fantastic. Okay.
Know that yellow cards and red cards didn't exist in football until the 1970 World Cup, and the reason they were added to the game was actually to solve a linguistic problem. In 1962, a referee named Ken Aston was refereeing a World Cup match between Italy and Chile, and he sent off an Italian player named Giorgio Ferrini. Aston and Ferrini,
Giorgio Ferrini.
however, didn't speak the same language and they couldn't understand each other. And Ferrini ended up refusing to leave the pitch until finally the local police intervened to forcefully remove him. Years later, Aston witnessed a similar thing happen at the 1966 World Cup. And while he was driving the next day, he noticed the traffic lights on the road and he had a brilliant idea.
That is brilliant.
Yellow for caution, red for stop.
You know, that's kind of cool, but we need to introduce the green card, like with... no, really, listen to me one moment, okay? So if we should introduce the green card with, like, players do something special, or, like, they show excellent sportsmanship, they can get a green card, which I don't know what benefit would give, but it'd be nice.
A universal set of signs that anyone could understand regardless of what language they spoke. Aston went home and cut out some little pocket-sized yellow and red cards to demonstrate his idea. And by the next World Cup in 1970, referees were using these cards to caution and send off players.
That's amazing, man. What a channel. I love the history.
Hello and welcome to a very special World Cup edition of Jack of All Languages. Today we're going to talk about language in football, or soccer as we call it here in the US.
Yes.
I'm a big football fan myself.
I can see that.
Forza Milan.
Forza Milan. Hey, yeah, that's right. Forza Milan then. All the Inter people are gonna dislike that, but here we are.
Given my interest in languages, one thing I'm always thinking about when I watch football is how the heck are all these players communicating with each other? I mean, look at the squad of a team like PSG. They have players from France, Portugal, Spain, Brazil, Ecuador, South Korea, Morocco, Georgia, Ukraine, Senegal, and more. So what languages are these guys using to talk to each other?
I think they mostly use they learn, football players usually learn the language of the place of residence. So if they're playing for a Italian football club, because I mean they're players for Juventus, Inter, Roma, whatever it is, Napoli, then they would learn Italian. That's the language they would use. I think also because they live there, so I guess they have an advantage. What I would imagine, I don't know, do they first communicate in English and then slowly learn the language? It's a very good question to ask. You know what's funny? As a child, because I'm from Sicily, Palermo, as you know, but when I was a child, Palermo was in B series. It wasn't in A series. Eventually did get to A series, and that's when I like started supporting Palermo, but when it was in B series, no one was really supporting it that much, and instead everyone would pick one of the A teams, right? And so even in my classroom, we had people supporting Juventus, people supporting Inter, people supporting Milan. These are the three most common. Did I ever meet anyone supporting Napoli? Not in Sicily. In Naples, of course. And then did I ever meet anyone supporting Roma, or Lazio? La Lazio. Yes, but it was kind of rare. Like, for instance, my cousin, he is a Roma supporter, but mostly because his dad is from Rome, even though his dad actually supports Lazio. You should see them during Derby. I supported Milan. So I was a Milanista, like him. Me and you, brother.
Do they use French because the club is in Paris? Or English because it's become such an international language?
Very good question.
Do they use Spanish because their coach speaks Spanish? Or do they communicate in a whole bunch of different languages all at the same time?
All right.
In today's episode, we're going to look at how players and clubs manage to cope with language barriers in modern football, a sport that has become incredibly international and incredibly diverse. But before we start, let me quickly remind you that you can get access to some great bonus content by joining me on Patreon. When you join, you'll get early access to every single video I make. And you'll get access to my exclusive blog posts that accompany each video and provide some additional fun information about each topic I cover. And I also want to
Splendid.
say a huge thank you to those of you who have already signed up. Now let's get started with
Yes,
today's show.
please.
We'll start with a kind of mind-blowing statistic. Modern football, as I said, is a very, very international sport. Just to give you a sense of how international it is, I want you to take a guess at what percentage of players in England's Premier League are foreign players.
What percentage of players in England's Premier League? It's definitely going to be, if he's, so obviously it's going to be above 50. He's impressed though. So it's going to be above 70. I'm going to say 70%.
I'll give you a second to make a guess. The answer is about 70%.
Bro, I swear I didn't watch it. I got it. Man, that was me. I read the room. We did, yes, goal. Let's see. Forza Milan, I guess.
And to put that in perspective, when the modern Premier League was founded in 1992, only 11 players were from countries outside the UK and Ireland. Today, there are almost 400 foreign players in the league. That's how much football has internationalized in the last few decades.
I really like that he's providing all of these facts, apart from like the linguistic aspect of it, which I imagine jack of all languages is going to be his focus. But I love that he kind of peppers in the historical things, information as well. Very good channel so far.
So what are the effects of this diverse international footballing culture on the players, the clubs, the fans, and anyone else involved in the game? There's actually a lot of research on this topic, and I'm going to be primarily drawing from 3 research papers, shown here but also linked in the description, that use surveys, interviews, questionnaires, and other methods to try to see inside the players' heads, to see how they struggled with or enjoyed the multilingual world of football. One finding was that on-pitch communication, the way players communicate while they're actually playing, was relatively easy and manageable, even for teams with players who didn't speak each other's languages. Why is that? Because communication during a football...
I was going to say limited vocabulary. It's not like they're going to talk about cell... You know, they're not going to talk about necessarily geography, history, literature. They're just going to learn the passa, tira, pallonetto.
Match is highly reliant on context, situational awareness, gestures and body movements, and a shared tactical and technical knowledge. That is all to say that football players do not generally struggle very much to communicate while they're actually playing, because they all understand this kind of universal language of football, which is...
It's a bit like martial arts. It's not like anyone speaks Japanese, really, but you can still do the lesson and understand the commands because those are contextual. And you learn that limited vocabulary, and then you can do a karate lesson or judo where the vocabulary shared is enough. In fact, even if you... Now, given, there was this, I want to say this very quickly, but there was this myth that I remember growing up practicing karate and I sucked at it, by the way, but I loved it, in Italy. And I remember that they were saying, no, we do all the commands in Japanese because this way, if you ever end up, you know, having an international lesson, we can still do the lesson, which was true. But they also said, if you do end up going to Japan, you can follow the lesson. That is false, because when I moved to Japan 4 years, I did practice Kyokushin karate in Japan, and could I understand the lesson? Yes. From my karate training? No, because I had a degree in Japanese, lived there, and was already fluent. But the reality is that if I had gone, like, there is no way. You imagine it as they just say ich, ni, san, shi, go, they do the numbers, and they say maegeri, mawashige. Absolutely no. They go full on. They go like, all right, so when the opponent comes towards you, what you need to do is a dodge to the right, but make sure that you maintain eye contact with and you're not going to understand anything on that. So there is that. It's massive, massive myth.
Okay? Made up of a lot of quick, easy expressions like man on, press, mark up, left, right, square, and so on. Plus a lot of gestures and pointing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mauricio Pochettino, the Argentine who currently coaches the US men's national team, once said that most of the time communication is about gestures rather than verbal communication.
Interesting.
Footballers are able to understand a gesture of positioning or movement better than a word. So in-game communication was not such a big deal. Context, gestures, tactical knowledge, all that stuff helps a lot. But what does turn out to be very difficult at times is off-the-pitch communication. Former players surveyed in this paper reported that the language barrier was much more often felt in pre and post match
Of
discussions.
course.
Perhaps even more significantly, for players who struggled to learn a new language, the barrier was sometimes very uncomfortable in daily life. While
Yeah, so you see, but you can still be an extremely successful football player or soccer player, even if you're not fluent and you don't, in fact, speak the language. This is fantastic.
trying to make personal connections with teammates, or
Yeah,
while trying to integrate to life in a new country,
of
or even
course.
while going to the grocery store or the bank. These
Hmm.
simple things determine whether a human being, not just a footballer, but a human being, feels comfortable in a place. And many players reported not having a lot of support in this aspect.
Yeah, no, and that's I can see the struggle there. I have a question though. We know in England it's called football, and in America it's called soccer. That's all fine and dandy. But if you say a footballer, why can you not say a soccerer? Do you know what I mean? Like, even if you say, oh, he's a soccer player, I guess you would have to say at that point. But you can also say football player. So, but you do have footballer. I petition for soccerer.
Something related that this research found is that the clubs did not have a uniform approach to addressing language barriers. Many clubs offered language classes to their players, but these classes were optional and several players reported skipping them.
Yeah,
Some clubs gave their players access to interpreters, but this was more rare.
of
So,
course.
how do players deal with this issue, with being thrown into a new country where you don't speak the language and being expected to immediately integrate and perform at a very high level?
Level.
There are different strategies according to this research, and some players do extremely well at adapting, even becoming polyglots who can speak 4, 5, 6, or even more
I hate the term polyglot, but whatever.
languages. And other players struggle a lot. Some
Hmm.
of the players surveyed in this research reported that relying on a bilingual teammate to help them was a really common
Of
strategy.
course, yeah.
Others reported feeling alienated from their team and never making deep connections with their teammates because of the language
Hmm.
barrier. For this research, 4 players gave in depth interviews detailing their linguistic lives as footballers. And their stories are really interesting, so I want to go through them one by
All
one.
right.
The footballers are unnamed, of course, to protect their identities, but they all played in some of Europe's biggest football leagues. Subject A, as he's called, was an Italian who had a long, successful career in Serie A, Italy's top professional football league. While in Italy, of course, he had no issue with the language, but he reported that some of his teammates, especially the Turkish ones,
Hmm.
struggled with the language because it was so different from Turkish. And the
Yeah.
club provided these players with interpreters. The club also gave all foreign players the option to go to language classes a couple times a week. At the end of his career, this player moved to the US to play in the MLS for a couple seasons. When he arrived, he proactively enrolled himself and his family in English classes, something he said he enjoyed and helped make his experience playing in the US a positive one.
Okay.
Subject B had a radically different experience. He was from Brazil and he arrived in Italy at age 20 with no knowledge of Italian,
Hmm.
thinking he had signed for a Serie A club. Instead, to his dismay, he realized when he got there that he had actually signed for a Serie B club,
Ooh.
Italy's second division,
Yeah.
and he didn't even fully understand his contract as the club never bothered to give him a translation.
That's
He said he
crazy.
was offered language classes, but he admitted that he often skipped them, and he had a very hard time connecting with his teammates because he just couldn't get a grasp of the language. The situation was so bad that
Man,
he
and
even
that
fell
is
into alcohol.
oh no, 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 alcohol? Goodness gracious. No, I was gonna say, man, and that's a Portuguese speaker, which is still a Romance language. So imagine if it's someone who speaks Arabic or someone who speaks Twi or well, then again, Africans usually also speak of a Romance language. Well, maybe someone who doesn't, could happen. Or it's someone who speaks Russian. Like it would be even harder. If yeah,
Fell into alcohol abuse and thought about quitting
damn it.
football altogether.
Mm,
Subject C was also Italian and also had a successful career in Serie A before
okay.
going to play in China for one season toward the
Oh,
end of his career. In China, he was assigned a personal interpreter not only for his footballing life, but also for his daily personal life.
hmm,
This helped him a lot, but he still reported struggling to connect with his Chinese
of course.
teammates who spoke neither Italian nor English.
Hmm.
Subject D was the biggest success story of the bunch. Born in Brazil, he moved to Spain as a teenager and quickly picked up both Spanish and Catalan. He
Right.
didn't go to the language classes offered by his club, he just picked up the languages from his teammates in his social circle.
Hmm.
Later in his career, he played in both Serie A
Yeah, it can also be personality driven, like what age. I'm kind of surprised that the 20-year-old struggled, but still.
and Ligue 1 in France, where he picked up both Italian and French by the same method, just by exposing himself to the
He is
language through
better.
his social life.
Yes.
And now that he's retired, he's learning English because he knows it'll help him in his future coaching career. These 4 cases lay out some of the
Very
linguistic
different.
difficulties of life as a footballer. While many players do manage to learn a bunch of different languages and prove highly adaptable, many others have a really hard time. Players are seen as assets by clubs, and they're expected to perform immediately. Another thing that came out in this research is that clubs hardly ever take language into consideration when negotiating transfers.
True.
It's just not really seen as a concern. But as we've seen, it's something that can negatively affect players' well-being and ultimately their performance.
Yeah, at the end of the day, maybe if you don't want to focus on the language itself, you should focus on the possible problems that it can cause. So kind of a secondary assessment, but it could F up the morale of the players.
But I'd like to end on a lighter note by looking at some of the greatest success stories of language learning footballers. So here's a fun question. Which player participating in this summer's World Cup speaks the most languages?
No
I'll
idea.
provide a caveat, which is that I don't know if this stat is really verifiable, but a very strong candidate would be the talented Belgian striker Romelu Lukaku.
Okay.
Lukaku is Belgium's all-time leading goal scorer by an insane margin, having scored 90 goals for his country, 54 more than the next man on the list, Kevin De Bruyne.
That's crazy.
But on top of his prolific goal scoring, Lukaku is one of football's greatest polyglots, speaking 8 different languages: French, Dutch, Lingala, English, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and reportedly a bit of German.
Oftentimes that's a thing. When you have people that speak many languages, a lot of those are related, so that it makes it easier, if you will. And we'll have to see to what level, because that's what I always say when I hear polyglot. I go like this, because okay, but to what level? But anyways, maybe he is really, really good.
Don't know if you're going to find a player on another team's squad this summer who can top that. Other famous polyglots in the footballing world include the legendary goalkeeper Peter Cech, who speaks Czech, English, French, German, Spanish, and Italian; Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who speaks Swedish, Bosnian, English, Italian, French, and Spanish; and coaches like Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, and Mikel Arteta, who probably speak something like 15 different languages between the 3 of them.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe 15, I'm sorry. I gotta see it. Because again, if they can speak about football and they can give commands to that's not speaking a language. And when we look at numbers like 15, I don't believe it until I see it. With that being said, thank you for the video. Really appreciated it. Cool channel. Forza Milan. See you tomorrow. Bye. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.